I had kept the rule for 6 years without difficulty. Never want what you cannot keep. It was simple enough. The kind of discipline that comes naturally to a man who has spent 30 years learning which things in this world are his to hold and which are only passing through. I had learned to distinguish between the two early, and the lesson had cost me enough that I did not intend to forget it. I was standing in the doorway of the Eastern Herb workroom, watching Saren fold a length of gray linen into her satchel, and my wolf was trembling. Not growling, not surging toward her the way wolves do in stories, crashing through ribs, demanding, loud, possessive, just trembling. The slow, fine trembling of a hound who knows a storm is coming and has run out of ways to argue with the sky. She did not look up. She had known I was standing there for several minutes. She always did. She simply folded the linen and pressed it into the worn leather satchel on the work table, and reached for the bundle of dried moss beside it. 3 weeks. That was the commission. 3 weeks to tend the Eastern Pack's wounded, consult on the respiratory illness that had moved through the pup runs since midwinter, and show my own pack healer, Old Brennan, the root and water treatment method she used in the border settlements, the one that no one in Ironspire had thought to try, though it had been working in the free settlements for years. 3 weeks, negotiated through the Standing Treaty of Passage, paid in stores and salt, as was customary for a traveling moss keeper. It was the last morning. My seneschal, Haddon, had reminded me of this at dawn with the kind of quiet efficiency that has always been his gift and, on this particular morning, felt like an unkindness. He had been among those on the council who found the arrangement at best unnecessary and at worst ill-advised. When her letter of passage had arrived 22 days ago, he had come to my study with it between 2 fingers, the way he sometimes carried documents he considered beneath his level. The woman belongs to no pack, he had told me. She answers to no alpha, keeps no oath to any hold. She comes, she works, she leaves. This is no different from hiring a carpenter. I had agreed with him. It had seemed entirely obvious. Then she had arrived at the gate with her satchel over one shoulder and an expression of complete, unhurried composure, and every wolf in the eastern courtyard had turned toward her at once. I had watched from the upper corridor, told myself it was the dried herbs in her pack. The wolves responded to unfamiliar scents. It was the sensible explanation. My wolf went very quiet in my chest. Not the quiet of indifference. The quiet of a creature paying the kind of attention it had not paid to anything in years, pressed close to the bars of the ribs and listening. I had gone back to my study and my correspondence and my rule. The first 3 days, I kept to the North Tower and the main hall. Ironspire is a large keep. The herb workroom and the wolf runs and the pup dens are in the Eastern Passage. My study, my hall, and the great wolf runs are in the north and west. There was no reason to find myself in the Eastern Passage, and so I did not. Both times I did pass through, once on the first day, once on the second. I heard her voice through the closed workroom door. Low, even, and practical. She was explaining something to Brennan about water temperature, and Brennan was making his customary sounds of reluctant agreement. The second time, I stood in the corridor for a moment I could not account for. Then I continued walking. On the 4th day, I went to inspect the pup runs. I did this every week regardless of anything else. The pup runs adjoin the eastern courtyard, and it was my habit, and I was not going to change my habit because a traveling healer happened to be working 20 feet away. She was already in the courtyard. She was sitting on the ground, the actual ground, in the mud and the new straw they had laid that morning, with 2 pups in her lap and a third working at the buckle of her satchel, with the focused determination of a small creature who had made a life choice and intended to see it through. She was not telling any of them to stop. She was scratching the ears of the nearest pup with one hand and examining something in its left eye with the other and talking very quietly to herself, or to it. And she did not appear to notice the cold. My great wolf, Crest, stood at the far edge of the run. I want to be precise about what he was doing. He was not still. He was not watching the way wolves watch prey, or intruders, or things that concern them professionally. His tail was moving, not wagging, not the quick, unguarded wag of a young wolf who has forgotten himself. The slow, deliberate swing of an old wolf who has made a decision about someone and is no longer pretending otherwise. Crest had not moved his tail in the direction of a stranger in 4 years. Saren looked up when I came through the gate. She did not scramble to her feet, did not apologize for sitting in the mud, or for the pup who had successfully opened her satchel and was now sitting inside it. She looked at me the way she looked at everything, quickly, honestly, filing the information, and then returned her attention to the pup with the eye. "The third one from the left has a secondary infection," she said. "Behind the left ear. Brennan should look at it today." "I'll tell him," I said. Crest crossed the courtyard and put his head against her knee. She laid one hand on his neck without looking at him, the way people touch things they are already comfortable with, the way you touch a door you've used 1,000 times without checking whether it's there. I stayed in the courtyard a moment longer than I intended. There was no reason to stay. I had seen the pups. I had been told about the infection. The wolf beside her did not require my observation. The pup who had opened her satchel was now attempting to climb inside it entirely. Saren reached over without looking and lifted it out by the scruff with the same unhurried competence she applied to everything, set it on the ground to her left, and turned her attention back to the wolf with the eye. "The ice in the upper pass has been breaking," she said, apparently to no one in particular, or perhaps to Crest. "You'll want to move the patrol routes north before the thaw if you don't want more injuries like that." I was not certain she was addressing me. I answered anyway. "We do that every spring." "The thaw is 2 weeks early this year," she said. "Brennan said so. He says it hasn't been this early since before his father died." She did not look up when she said this. She said it the way she said everything useful, simply, without emphasis, as a fact being offered to whoever wanted it. "I'll tell the patrol captain," I said. "Good," she said. I left the courtyard. I went back to the North Tower and stood at the window for longer than I would like to admit, and I reminded myself of my rule with the careful patience of a man who suspects he may need the reminder more than once. The council met on the 8th day. Haddon raised the matter of the spring border assessment. My cousin Ferric raised the eastern trade route. And then, with the manner of a man addressing a minor administrative footnote, Haddon mentioned that the mosskeeper's work was proceeding to schedule, and she would depart on the agreed date. "Of course," I said. "She has the pups following her," said Ferric, who found most things mildly amusing, and some things genuinely funny, and had a reliable gift for identifying which was which. "All 6 of them. She doesn't call them. They just go." He paused. "Crest as well." "Wolves like anyone who smells of plants," said Haddon. Ferric looked at me. I said nothing. "I offered to show her the Great Hall," Ferric continued. "She said she had seen great halls. I told her ours was notable. She said she would take my word for it." He appeared delighted by this. "I have not been told that since I was 19. "She is here on a commission," said Haddon. "She is professional and efficient, which is to her credit, and she will finish the commission and go. These are the terms." "Yes," I said. Haddon nodded with the satisfaction of a man who has refiled an important document and found the filing correct. "What was the respiratory treatment she used?" I asked. Haddon blinked. "River reed extract. Warm water, given 3 times a day over 10 days. Brennan reports the affected pups are well." "Good," I said. "Carry on." After the council, Ferric fell into step beside me in the corridor. He did not say anything for a moment. Then, "You know what Crest's behavior means." "Crest is a wolf," I said. "He is well disposed toward people who spend time in the pup runs. It means very little." "In 4 years," said Ferric, "he has been well disposed toward you, Brennan, and the 3 wolves he hunts with. No one else." "Ferric, I'm only observing." "Stop observing." He did not stop observing. He merely stopped saying what he observed out loud, which was a small mercy. On the 12th night, one of the patrol wolves came back from the eastern ridge with a gash along the left flank and a broken front paw. Not from a fight, from a fall on the ice stone at the upper pass, the kind of injury that was preventable and happened anyway and left a wolf in real pain and real danger if it wasn't managed carefully through the night. He was one of mine. Not the strongest or the fastest, but I had run beside him once, years ago, in the dark between the northern passes, and I knew his face. Brennan was asleep. The night runner went for Saren. I heard about it from Haddon the next morning, delivered as a brief administrative note at the end of a longer accounting of supply matters. The wolf had been tended, he was stable. The moss keeper had sat with him through the night. I went to the wolf den before I went anywhere else. The patrol wolf was sleeping. His breathing was even and slow, the particular sound of an animal that has been in pain and has been given permission to rest. The bandaging on the gash was clean and more precise than anything Brennan typically produced. He was skilled, but he was old, and his hands shook slightly, and the evidence of an unwavering hand was plain in every rap and knot. In the chair beside the low bench where the wolf lay, someone had been sitting for a very long time. The cushion held the shape of it. On the floor beside the chair was a cup that still held a thin pool of cold water at the bottom, and next to it, a scrap of linen with a few notes written on it in a small, steady hand. Observations, a record of the night's temperature, a note about the wolf's response at the 3rd hour. She was gone, back to the herb workroom, or to her bed, having been there all night, having left no note for me or for Haddon, having told no one, having simply stayed because the wolf needed someone to stay. I stood in the wolf den for a while. The patrol wolf's ear twitched in his sleep. His breathing was the long, even rhythm of deep rest, the sound of an animal that had been frightened and hurt and had then been carefully managed through its worst hours by someone who knew what she was doing and had not considered leaving until the danger was past. I picked up the scrap of linen from the floor and read it. Her handwriting was small and unornamented and completely legible. 2nd hour, temperature holding. 3rd hour, restlessness, rewrapped the paw. 4th hour, settled. Notes for Brennan. Monitor left shoulder for stiffness when the wolf stands. The fall from the ice likely twisted it in addition to the paw. She had noted the thing Brennan would have missed. She had been alone here in the middle of the night, watching a wolf she had no professional or personal obligation to, with a cold cup of water on the floor and a scrap of linen for notes, and she had caught the detail that mattered. I set the linen back down beside the cup. My rule had never required me to be cold. It had only required me not to want what I could not keep. I had always believed these were entirely different things. I was having some difficulty, standing in that den with the cup on the floor and the notes in her small, steady hand, maintaining the distinction. On the 14th evening, she knocked on my study door. She came in and stood before the desk with no particular ceremony and said she wanted to speak about the Eastern Pack's feeding schedule, which she believed was contributing to a recurring joint complaint that Brennan had been treating in isolation when the root cause was nutritional. She had made a chart. She set it on the desk and explained it, one finger moving along the columns, direct and clear, wasting no words. I listened to the words she was saying. I was also, in a way I found difficult to discipline, aware of her in the room. The particular quality of her stillness. She did not fidget. She did not manage her appearance. She did not watch me to see whether I was impressed. She looked at the chart and at me in roughly equal proportion, attended to what was relevant, and let the rest alone. I had been in rooms with many people over 30 years of holding Ironspire, and a significant portion of them came into my study with something they wanted from me beyond the subject of our meeting. Approval, fear, alliance, some private calculation running beneath the stated one. She wanted me to understand about the feeding schedule and do something useful with the understanding. That was the entire extent of her ambition for the conversation. The way she talked about the wolves, too. The way some people talk about animals they have chosen to be responsible for without requiring credit for it. Practical on the surface, unsentimental in the language, and underneath that entirely committed in the way that matters. When she said he's a good wolf, referring to the one she had sat with through the night, she said it the way a person names something true, not sentiment, accuracy. The small ink mark on the edge of her right hand, from wherever she had been writing before she came here, was the blue-black of the River Reed ink Brennan kept in the workroom. She finished the explanation. She picked up the chart. "I'll leave a written copy for Brennan," she said. "When I go." "Saren." She turned back. Her expression did not change. She waited. I had been about to say something. I could feel the shape of it, not a question, not a command, not any of the things I normally said to people in this room. Something that my rule had no vocabulary for, because my rule had been designed to prevent exactly this category of thing from developing to the point where it needed to be said. I held it in my mouth for a moment, a long moment. Then I let it go. "Thank you," I said. "For the wolf, 2 nights ago. I should have said so before now." She looked at me, not with warmth, exactly, but with that particular honest attention of hers, which was beginning to feel like something I could not afford to have directed at me for too long. "He's a good wolf," she said. "It wasn't a hardship." She left. Crest came out from under my desk. He had been there all evening, curled under my chair in perfect silence, which I had been ignoring, and went to the closed door and pressed his nose against it. Then he looked back at me with an expression that would have been, on a man's face, unmistakably judgmental. "I know," I said to him. He lay down against the door and did not move for the rest of the night. On the 17th day, the council met again, and Haddon mentioned, in the matter-of-fact tone he used for all administrative information regardless of weight, that there was an offer from the Western Settlement Alliance, a permanent healing post, pack-attached, good terms, and regular stores. He had heard of it through the treaty correspondence. It was not, he added, anything that need concern us, since the commission was nearly finished and the arrangement had always been temporary. "She might take it," Ferrick said, "or she might go back to the border routes. She doesn't seem like someone who stays in one place for long." "No," I said, "she doesn't." I said this with complete flatness and meant for it to be the end of the subject. Ferrick studied me for a moment. He was not, despite everything, a foolish man. He changed the subject. That evening I sat in my study for a long time without doing any of the things I had intended to do. The fire burned down. I let it burn down and did not call anyone to rebuild it. Crest lay across my feet and sighed once, deeply, the way wolves sigh when they find a human situation beneath comment. In 5 days she would go. The commission would end. The herb workroom would smell of dried moss for a week, and then it would be only stone and cold again, and Brennan would have his notes and his chart, and the pups would follow him around the courtyard instead, and Crest would go back to being particular about strangers. Everything would be considerably simpler. I had been in considerably simpler situations before and found them perfectly manageable. I was very certain of this for the rest of the evening. By the 18th morning I had given up being certain and had moved on to simply enduring the fact of the situation, which was that I had not held my rule as well as I believed I had, and that this was inconvenient, and that she was leaving in 4 days, and that the simplest thing to do was keep my distance for 4 days and let the commission finish and not compound a situation I had already, through some failure of attention I could not fully identify, allowed to become more complicated than it should have been. I managed this for most of the 19th day. I was less successful on the 20th evening, when I walked past the eastern courtyard at dusk and saw her sitting on the low stone bench inside the wolf run, with Crest's head in her lap and 3 pups arranged across her feet, and she was looking at the sky, the way people look when they are thinking about something at a distance, and she did not know I was there. I stood at the corner of the passage for a long moment. Then I went back to the North Tower, and I told myself it was the cold that had made me stop. On the 21st morning, the last morning, I was standing in the doorway of the herb workroom before I had made any conscious decision to go there. She was packing, the satchel open on the work table, the dried bundles sorted and wrapped in their order, the chart she had made for Brennan left on the highest shelf with a note pinned to it. She moved without hurry, without any ceremony. She did not appear to be making a decision. She had made her decision already, which was that this was the end of the commission, and she was a woman who kept her agreements, and so she was going. She had folded the gray linen. She was reaching for the last of the moss bundles. My wolf had gone completely still, the stillness of a held breath, of the moment before thunder, when even the trees stopped moving. Saren lifted her cloak from the peg on the wall. The mate mark blazed. I felt it first, a heat on my left wrist so sudden and so total that my hand came up without thought, and I was looking down at the mark burning gold through the cloth of my sleeve before I understood what I was seeing. 6 years. 6 years I had lived with a dormant mate bond, quiet and unremarkable. The way you live with an old scar. It is there, you have noted it. It does not trouble you in daily life, and you have long since stopped expecting it to change. I heard her make a sound, a single, involuntary breath. She was looking at her own wrist, the same fire, the same mark, burning through the cuff of her sleeve, not the faint suggestion of a dormant bond, but the full, undeniable flare of a bond that had been waiting and had now, at last, found its corresponding half. In the corridor behind me, Haddon made a sound I had never heard him make. One of the 2 guards said something under his breath. Saren looked up from her wrist. She looked at me. Her expression was the same as it always was, measured, attentive, taking the thing in front of her seriously. Only now there was something beneath the measurement, not fear, something quieter than fear and more serious. She was reading me the way she read everything, as a piece of honest information she intended to understand before she decided anything. I did not speak. I was not certain what I would say. The mark on my wrist was still burning, and my wolf, who had been trembling, and then silent, and then pressed against closed doors for 21 days, was making a sound I had never heard him make before. Not a growl, not a howl, not the low rumble of dominance. Something wordless and certain, like the sound of a river finding the bottom of a long valley, like something arriving somewhere it had been traveling toward for a very long time. She looked down at her wrist again, then at mine, then at me. She set the cloak back on the peg. Deliberately, not in a rush, not dramatically, she set it back, the way you put something down, when you have made a decision, and you want both hands free while you finish making it. She crossed the room, not toward the door. She stopped 2 feet in front of me, close enough that I could see the gold still moving along her wrist, the mark settling from its first blaze into a deep, steady warmth. Close enough that my wolf exhaled, a long, slow release, as though he had been waiting for this specific moment since the morning she arrived at the gate, and he had gone quiet, and pressed himself close, and begun his long and patient vigil. I want to be very clear, Saren said, that I did not plan this. Neither did I. I was leaving. I know. I still have the Western Commission offer. I know. She looked at me for a moment with that particular directness of hers. Then she said, "Are you going to keep listing what you know, or are you going to say something useful?" Somewhere beneath the weight of the last 21 days, something shifted. My wolf made a sound that was, in some way, the wolf equivalent of a man who has been holding himself very carefully and has finally allowed himself to breathe. "I have a rule," I said. "I have kept it for 6 years." "What rule?" "Never fall in love with someone who could leave." She was quiet. The mark on her wrist had settled fully now. Not dimming, not fading, simply quiet and certain and permanent, the way bonds settle when they have done what they were made to do. "That's a lonely rule," she said. It was a practical one. Rules usually are, when they're built to protect something. Her eyes moved to my wrist, then back to my face. "You've already broken it." I had. I could not have told her the exact moment. Perhaps on the 4th day, in the courtyard, when Crest moved his tail for the first time in 4 years. Perhaps on the 12th night, standing in the wolf den looking at the shape a person leaves in a chair after sitting all night with a wounded wolf. Perhaps on the 14th evening, when I had the thing I wanted to say in my mouth and chose the easier words instead. Perhaps long before any of those moments, in some part of the bone that does not consult the mind before making its determinations. "I know," I said. "So," she held out her wrist, not demanding, not performing, simply presenting a piece of information she judged I should have, the way she had laid the chart on my desk 8 days ago. "What do you want to do about it?" I reached out and took her wrist in my hand, carefully, my thumb resting over the mark. The warmth of it ran through my palm and up into the wrist and into the chest, and my wolf, who had been every kind of troubled and quiet and watchful and trembling for 21 days, settled into a stillness that was not held breath, was not waiting, was simply the stillness of arrival. "Stay," I said. Not a command. I want to be clear about that. An alpha king who commanded his mate to stay had never understood what a mate was. I said it the way I meant it, as a request, as honest as I knew how to make anything, from a man who had kept his rule for 6 years and broken it in 3 weeks and was not, in this moment, sorry. She held her ground. She did not answer immediately, which was entirely her nature, and which I would spend years coming to appreciate. "I'd want to travel," she said. "Spring and fall. The border settlements need someone." "Then you go in the spring and the fall." "I don't answer to councils. I would not ask you to. And I am going to sit with the wolves whenever I want. And I am not interested in hearing about propriety from anyone. Crest would leave the hold if I tried to stop you. I value Crest." She looked at me. Something shifted in her face. Not a smile, not quite, but the thing that lives in the vicinity of a smile in a person who does not distribute them carelessly. Something warm that was more valuable because it was not easily given. "All right," she said. She did not go back for the cloak. Haddon, in the corridor, had composed himself by the time I turned around. He gave me a look that communicated several things efficiently and without the need for words. That he had revised his assessment of the arrangement, that he would perform his duties with complete professionalism going forward, and that no one would ever speak of the sound he had made. Ferrick said, "I knew it on the fourth day," and was ignored. The letter to the Western Settlement Alliance was written that afternoon and delivered by the morning rider. It was brief and professional, and declined the commission on the grounds that the moss keeper's plans had changed. Saren did not wear the mate mark openly, at first. She was not, she explained to me once, a woman who performed things for audiences. She was a practical person, and her business was her own. Crest knew. The pups knew. Brennan, who had understood long before either of us did and had simply been waiting with the patient good manners of a man who has watched wolves pair up all his life, said nothing to anyone. In the spring, she went to the border settlements, as she had said she would. She was gone for 6 weeks. She wrote me a letter on the 4th week, which arrived crumpled and water-stained, and containing 2 paragraphs about the root disease she had found in the southern runs, and 1 line at the end that I read 6 times and then kept. She came back. That is, in the end, the thing that matters. She could have gone to the Western Settlement. She could have taken any number of commissions. She could have walked through the door on the last morning of her commission and continued on with the life she had been living, which was her own life and a good one, and I would have had no right to stop her. She turned back. Not because the mate mark demanded it. The mark told both of us something true, but it did not make her choice. She made her choice, as she made every choice, with both eyes open and full knowledge of what she was walking toward. That was hers. The rule I had kept for 6 years is gone now. In its place is the particular, quiet satisfaction of a man who has been corrected by fate and had the sense, at the last moment, not to argue. The herb workroom in the Eastern Passage still smells of moss and river reed, even in the cold months now. Crest has claimed the doorway for his personal use. The pups from that first winter are grown, and they are still, to a one, entirely devoted to her. She told me once, in the early spring of the year after the commission, that she had known something was wrong with my rule the first week she was here. Not with the rule itself. The rule was self-protective and understandable, and she was not unkind about it. With the fact that I was still applying it to her. You can't apply a rule about keeping to something that already has its own way of coming back, she said. That's not a rule. That's just hoping. I told her she was the most direct person I had ever met. She said that was probably because I had been spending too much time with councils. She was not wrong. I think about the door sometimes, still. The cloak on the peg, the blaze on her wrist, the way she set the cloak back down without ceremony, without drama, as though staying was simply the next sensible thing to do once you knew the truth of the situation. That was the morning I stopped keeping my rule. I have not missed it once.